The lights outside the Midtown event hall glimmered against the cold Manhattan night, but Charlotte Avery barely felt the chill. She stood at the entrance in a simple black gown, one she'd bought years ago during a clearance sale, thinking it would do for evenings like this. Tonight, it was apparently an embarrassment. "God, Charlotte," Preston Kane scoffed loudly, ensuring the surrounding donors heard him. "Could you at least try not to look like you wandered in from a thrift shop?" A few people turned. Some hid their smirks. Others looked away out of politeness. Charlotte's throat tightened, the first sign of her stress-induced aphonia. Her voice slipped away before she could defend herself. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Preston wasn't done. "You know what? Just go home. I can't have people thinking this." He gestured at her dress, her shaking hands, her silence. "Is the woman representing me?" A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Preston straightened his cufflinks, basking in the attention. To him, humiliation was just another tool. He turned to Alexis Rowan, radiant in silver satin, and offered his arm. "Now she knows how to dress for a gala." Alexis smiled sweetly, knowing exactly what she was doing. Charlotte stood frozen, humiliated, her voice gone, her chest trembling. Preston had reduced years of her loyalty to a public punchline. And then, a low, commanding engine purred from the curb. Heads turned, cameras lifted, conversations stopped. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, midnight blue with a chrome grille polished like a mirror, glided to a perfect stop before the entrance. The driver stepped out. He straightened his jacket and scanned the crowd, until his eyes landed on Charlotte. He bowed slightly. "Ms. Avery," he said clearly, his voice echoing across the marble steps. "Mr. Hale requests your presence on the red carpet. Your arrival is expected." Every head whipped toward Preston, who suddenly looked like he'd swallowed ice. And then another figure stepped out of the Rolls-Royce. Someone Preston never thought would stand beside his wife. Charlotte Avery had learned long ago that silence could be safer than speaking. Growing up in a foster home in Michigan, she had mastered the art of shrinking herself whenever the world grew too loud. But marriage to Preston Kane taught her a different kind of quiet, one that dimmed her light, one apology at a time. Inside their penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, where Preston had built a life that looked perfect from the outside. Marble floors, tall windows, a kitchen lined with stainless steel appliances he never used. Their world shimmered, sterile, curated, loveless. To him, Charlotte was an accessory, a detail often overlooked but expected to be flawless. He used to introduce her with pride. "My wife, Charlotte. She's brilliant." But lately, the introductions shifted. "This is Charlotte. She works somewhere in communications." Dismissive, convenient, a slow erasure. Charlotte felt the change like a draft under a closed door, subtle, constant, chilling. Preston's colleagues from Park Avenue would visit, drinking whiskey older than both of them, laughing too loudly at his jokes. And when Charlotte walked in with a tray, they'd exchange looks, wordless, superior. She wasn't glamorous enough, not connected enough, not Kane material. And whenever she faltered under their scrutiny, her voice would crack, sometimes disappear entirely. Preston hated that. "Can you not lose your voice every time someone asks you a question?" He'd snap. "It's pathetic, Charlotte." But she kept trying, kept forgiving, kept believing that maybe, just maybe, she could be enough for him again. Then came the subtle betrayals, late nights at the office, unanswered texts, perfume on his suit she didn't own. She knew something was wrong, but fear held her tongue. She couldn't lose the one person she believed had ever truly chosen her. Except, he hadn't. Not for a long time. The morning of the gala, Charlotte found a receipt tucked into Preston's jacket. A boutique on Fifth Avenue, known for custom gowns. Not her size, not her style, not for her. Her hands trembled, not from anger, but recognition. Preston wasn't drifting away. He was already gone. And standing outside that event hall hours later, after he humiliated her in front of everyone, one truth finally settled into place. She wasn't losing him. He had been chipping away at her until she disappeared. But tonight, for the first time, someone else saw her, and Preston would regret ever making her small. Manhattan had a rhythm Charlotte Avery understood better than she understood most people. The city pulsed with ambition. Clean glass towers rising against the sky, taxis weaving through traffic, the low hum of possibility in every street light. It was a place where no one asked where you came from, only what you could build. And Charlotte built things. Quietly, invisibly, brilliantly. By day, Preston introduced her as someone who handled communications, a vague title meant to shrink her. But behind closed doors, behind her sleek MacBook Pro and piles of crisis reports, Charlotte was something far rarer. A strategic architect who rebuilt reputations for some of the most powerful names on Wall Street. She crafted narratives that saved companies from collapse. She wrote speeches for executives who never once bothered to learn her name. She solved scandals before the press even smelled them, and she did it all anonymously. By choice. Charlotte never needed applause. She only needed purpose. Her small office on the 27th floor overlooked Park Avenue. Inside, everything was orderly. Color-coded files, a Mont Blanc pen that had been a gift from a grateful client. A framed quote she kept tucked behind her computer. "You don't need a crown to hold your head high." No one knew she kept the city's secrets. No one knew she was the quiet pulse behind billion-dollar turnarounds. Not even Preston. Especially not Preston. He believed she simply edited emails. He believed her salary was cute. He believed she was harmless, unimportant, easy to discard. Yet just that morning, before the gala disaster, Charlotte had completed the most important crisis blueprint of her career, one requested by a man she had never met in person. Dominic Hale. His email had been brief but striking. "Your work is exceptional. Meet me at the gala. There's something you deserve to hear directly." She didn't know what he meant. She didn't know her name had been whispered in boardrooms far above Preston's reach. She didn't know her talent had caught the attention of someone capable of changing her entire future. What she did know, painfully well, was how the world looked at her. A quiet woman with a fading voice, and a husband who diminished her. But Manhattan had a strange way of revealing truth at the most unexpected moments. And tonight, as photographers turned their lenses toward that Rolls-Royce, the city was finally about to show Charlotte Avery who she really was. Alexis Rowan knew exactly how to enter a room. She didn't glide. She calculated. Every step, every smile, every tilt of her chin was a curated performance designed to make people underestimate her before she struck. At 29, she had already built a reputation in Los Angeles and New York as the stylist to rising stars, the woman behind the perfect red carpet illusions. But Alexis didn't care about fashion. She cared about leverage. Behind the shimmering gowns and champagne-soaked parties, she worked quietly as a social fixer, someone hired by powerful people to get close, gather intel, and pull strings when necessary. She was beauty draped over a blade. When Preston Kane crossed her path, she didn't fall for him. She clocked him. The insecurity masked as arrogance, the hunger for praise, the cracks in his marriage he thought no one could see. He was exactly the kind of man she could use. It started as an assignment, a discreet message from a competitor in the tech advertising world. Get close to him. Find what he's hiding. Alexis accepted without hesitation. She was paid handsomely to uncover his weaknesses. But then she discovered something even better than financial fraud, or manipulated metrics, something far more exploitable. Preston Kane's obsession with status made him cruel, and his cruelty was predictable. The first time she watched him belittle Charlotte at a private dinner, Alexis kept her expression perfectly soft, perfectly sympathetic, but inside she was smiling. Preston didn't realize she had placed her phone beside her cocktail, recording everything. Each insult, each degrading joke, each moment he tried to make his wife invisible. This wasn't just dirt. This was dynamite. Still, Alexis didn't anticipate what happened next. She didn't anticipate Charlotte, quiet, trembling, almost voiceless, would be the one person who made her hesitate. There was something unsettling about Charlotte's gentleness, and something Alexis had never encountered among the powerful and corrupt. It wasn't weakness, it was sincerity. And sincerity, Alexis had learned, was the one thing in Manhattan that couldn't be bought or manipulated. It made people want to protect you. It made monsters look monstrous. So on the night of the gala, when Preston barked insults at Charlotte loud enough for the entire crowd to hear, Alexis didn't just let her phone record. She angled it, framed the shot, captured every cruel word in crystal clarity. Because tonight, Alexis wasn't just a mistress. She was the fuse Preston had lit with his own arrogance. And she knew the explosion was coming. The humiliation should have ended when Preston dismissed Charlotte like discarded clothing. But it didn't. He kept going, feeding on the attention, unaware the entire moment would soon become the very rope he'd hang himself with. "Honestly, Charlotte," he said loudly, adjusting his tux as if preparing for cameras, "you're lucky I even brought you. A woman in your position should know her place." The words sliced through the cold air. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with the fascinated guilt of people witnessing a car crash. Charlotte felt her voice strangled under the weight of his tone, her throat tightening until it burned. She pressed a hand lightly against her collarbone, trying to stay steady. Preston mistook her silence for compliance. He always did. Alexis, standing beside him in that shimmering silver gown, raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. She gave Charlotte a small, almost sympathetic smile, a smile that felt like a blade wrapped in velvet. All the while, her phone was angled just right inside her clutch. Charlotte's knees trembled, her world tilted. Not from the cruelty, she'd survived worse, but from the realization that she had ignored every warning sign. Years of shrinking herself just to keep peace with a man who treated kindness as weakness. When Preston waved her off like an inconvenience, a soft murmur stirred through the crowd. A woman Charlotte had never seen before whispered, "Poor thing," while a man muttered, "He's crossed a line." But Preston didn't hear any of it. He rarely heard anything that didn't praise him. He stepped toward the velvet rope leading to the gala's entrance, offering his arm to Alexis. "Come on, let's not keep the real guests waiting." Charlotte's heart pounded. Her vision blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from a sudden, overwhelming clarity. This was the moment she truly lost her marriage, not in a fight, not in betrayal, but in this public stripping of dignity. For a split second, she considered slipping away into the night, disappearing like the ghost Preston believed she was. But then, a reverberating engine broke through the hush. A luxury hum, deep and unmistakable, rolled across the steps as a midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled in front of the entrance. People stopped talking. Cameras lifted. Security turned. And Charlotte Avery, still trembling, still voiceless, became the center of gravity. Because someone inside that car had come for her. Preston Kane had always believed he was the smartest man in any room. He prided himself on reading people, predicting their moves, exploiting their weaknesses. But as he watched Dominic Hale escort Charlotte toward the flash of cameras, Something unfamiliar twisted in his chest. Fear. Not jealousy. Not embarrassment. Fear. Because Preston knew exactly who Dominic Hale was. Not just a billionaire, not just a Wall Street titan, but a man who could destroy entire corporations with a single acquisition. A man whose silence held more weight than Preston's loudest boast. A man who didn't appear at public galas unless he had a very specific purpose. And tonight, that purpose was Charlotte. Alexis stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You didn't tell me you were connected to Dominic Hale." "I'm not," Preston hissed. She blinked, genuinely surprised. "Then why is he treating your wife like that?" Preston had no answer. His mouth tightened. For years, and he had crafted the narrative, Charlotte was lucky to have him. Charlotte wasn't ambitious enough. Charlotte couldn't possibly attract powerful men. He thought he had crushed every spark in her until she was small enough to fit inside his shadow. But now she was glowing under the lights, her arm linked with a man whose presence made CEOs straighten their ties. She wasn't small, she wasn't invisible, she wasn't his to control. A nearby donor leaned toward Preston with a sympathetic nod. Didn't know Charlotte had connections that deep. Impressive woman. The words burned like acid. Preston forced a smile he couldn't sustain. His perfect facade cracked. Sweat gathered at his hairline despite the winter cold. Then it got worse. 2 board members from his company approached, eyes sharp. "Preston, is it true?" one whispered. "So your wife worked with Hale Capital on their crisis recovery? And you never mentioned it?" Preston's throat went dry. "She didn't. I mean, she's not." But they were already exchanging looks, troubled looks, doubtful looks. Charlotte's success wasn't supposed to catch up to him. Not here, not publicly, not at the exact moment his reputation depended on remaining untouchable. His company was already under quiet scrutiny. He couldn't afford whispers. Yet the whispers had begun. Alexis narrowed her eyes at him. "What did you do to her, Preston? Because whatever it was, it's coming back for you." He glared at her, but she didn't flinch. Somewhere deep inside, the truth surfaced. The downfall he always feared wasn't coming from the SEC, or from competitors, or from the press. It was coming from the woman he never believed could rise without him. So the red carpet of the Metropolitan Museum of Art had seen legends, billionaires, Oscar winners. But tonight, it paused for someone no one expected. Charlotte Avery. As Dominic Hale guided her forward, the camera flashes intensified, shifting from idle flickers to a storm of white light. Photographers leaned over the barriers, shouting her name. Not Preston's, not Alexis's, hers. "Miss Avery, over here!" "Charlotte, who are you wearing?" "Is this your first public appearance with Mr. Hale?" She felt weightless, as if the ground had vanished beneath her. The questions, the attention, the awe. They weren't meant for a woman who had spent years mastering the art of invisibility. But Dominic's steady presence beside her anchored her, his hand warm at her back. Inside the grand marble atrium, staff members and board executives paused mid-conversation, stunned as Charlotte walked in. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering reflections across her dark gown, suddenly elegant under the golden lights, no longer the cheap dress Preston mocked. Dominic leaned toward her, his voice low. "You belong here more than anyone in this building." Her breath caught. No one had ever said words like that to her, not without strings attached, not without condescension. A cluster of donors approached, smiling warmly. "So you are the strategist behind Hale Capital's recovery? We've heard remarkable things about your work. Dominic never praises anyone. He must trust you deeply." Charlotte's cheeks warmed, but she managed a nod, her voice still fragile, yet present. "Thank you. I'm honored." Across the room, several executives whispered to each other, and glancing at Preston, still lingering at the entrance like an uninvited shadow. His jaw clenched as he watched people swarm around the wife he spent years diminishing. Every compliment she received was a slap across his ego. Alexis, standing slightly behind him, murmured, "You really didn't know she was this talented, did you?" Preston didn't answer. He couldn't. Meanwhile, Dominic guided Charlotte toward the center of the gala, where a spotlight shone on a towering sculpture draped in silk. It was the night's main unveiling, reserved for the gala's most honored guests. Dominic offered his arm again. "Charlotte, I'd like you to stand with me for the reveal." Her eyes widened. Me? Why?" Dominic smiled softly. "Because this night is about the people who built something extraordinary, and you're one of them." Behind them, Preston's world began to crumble. The lights dimmed as the MC approached the podium, his voice echoing across the magnificent marble hall. Guests drifted closer, champagne glasses in hand, curious about the evening's highly anticipated reveal. But even amid the elegance, whispers continued swirling around Charlotte Avery, her sudden rise, her unexpected connection to Dominic Hale, the quiet confidence beginning to bloom in her posture. Dominic stood beside her, one hand lightly resting behind her back, as though shielding her from the gaze of the room. He didn't need to touch her to command attention. His presence alone redefined the space. When the MC announced, "Tonight, we honor the strategist behind Hale Capital's most critical turnaround," the crowd held its breath. Charlotte assumed she'd fade quietly into the background as usual. But instead, Dominic stepped forward and said her name. Charlotte Avery. A wave of gasps rolled through the audience. Even the chandeliers seemed to vibrate with surprise. Charlotte froze. I didn't. Dominic, I'm not." "You are," he said gently, his voice meant for her alone. "You saved thousands of jobs. You protected shareholders. You rebuilt trust when it was hanging by a thread. And you did it without asking for recognition." The silk covering the sculpture fell, revealing a towering installation made of shattered glass, rearranged into a phoenix, rising, powerful, reborn. At the base was a polished plaque. "In honor of Charlotte Avery's resilience and genius." The audience erupted in applause. Some clapped out of admiration, others out of shock. But all eyes were on Charlotte, no longer the timid woman hiding behind her husband, but the architect of a monumental corporate recovery. Across the room, Preston paled. He had known nothing, absolutely nothing. The woman he'd humiliated, belittled, dismissed as unremarkable, had secretly become the backbone of a multi-billion-dollar rescue operation. One of Preston's board members muttered, "This is bad. If the press learns she's connected to us, they'll wonder why we undervalued her. Why he undervalued her." Another whispered, "He can't survive this. Not with an SEC inquiry already circling." Alexis, biting her lip, recorded Preston's unraveling expression. For once, her eyes held something close to pity. Charlotte's breath trembled, overwhelmed by the applause, the lights, the truth finally given a voice. Dominic leaned closer. "No, you've been invisible for too long, Charlotte. Tonight, the world finally sees you." Behind them, Preston Kane realized the one thing he feared most. Charlotte no longer needed him. And now, everyone knew it. Preston Kane had never felt powerless a day in his life. He was the man who closed deals with a handshake, who charmed investors with a single rehearsed smile, who walked into every boardroom believing the world bent slightly in his direction. But tonight, the world tilted away from him. The applause still echoed through the hall as Charlotte remained near the Phoenix sculpture, surrounded by admiring guests and curious executives. Preston tried to push through the crowd, but people didn't part for him the way they once did. Some glanced at him with thinly veiled judgment. Others didn't look at him at all. He was becoming background noise. Alexis drifted at his side, her expression unreadable. For once, she didn't touch him, didn't cling to his arm, didn't attempt to soften the blow. She simply observed, cool, distant, calculating. "Preston," she murmured, "you should fix your face. You look like you've seen a ghost." He ignored her, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitched. Across the hall, two of his board members whispered behind their glasses of champagne. Their eyes slid toward him, then toward Charlotte, puzzled, skeptical, almost accusatory. Preston caught fragments of their murmuring. Why didn't he disclose her involvement? Does he understand how bad this could look? If she was capable of this, what else did he hide because of ego? The words hit harder than Charlotte's absence ever could. He tried again to approach her, but Dominic Hale stepped subtly between them, not with aggression, but with quiet authority. It was a simple shift of posture, but it communicated everything. You don't own her. You don't get to speak to her whenever you choose. Preston stopped mid-step. Dominic's gaze locked onto his, a calm, steady warning, the kind that came from a man powerful enough to end careers with a single sentence. "Preston," Dominic said coolly, "this is not the moment to disturb Charlotte. She deserves the recognition she's earned." Earned. The words scorched him. "She's my wife," Preston snapped. "I think I'm allowed to speak to her." Dominic didn't blink. Marriage is not ownership, and respect is not optional. A quiet gasp slipped from someone nearby. Charlotte turned slightly at the sound of raised voices, but instead of rushing to Preston, she looked back at Dominic, eyes searching his face for guidance and safety. Preston felt something collapse inside him. Jealousy? Fear? Loss? No. It was the realization that Charlotte no longer looked to him for anything. And worse, for the first time, Preston Kane understood that the consequences of his cruelty had finally come home. Charlotte had never been good at holding the center of attention. Even now, surrounded by praise and warm smiles, she felt the familiar tremor in her throat. Her voice, her most fragile trait, threatened to fade again. She excused herself from the crowd for a moment, stepping toward a quieter corner beneath a marble archway. Dominic followed at a respectful distance, stopping when she finally turned to face him. "You did beautifully out there," he said gently. Charlotte shook her head. I didn't do anything. I just wrote a report." Dominic smiled, calm, knowing. "Charlotte, you rebuilt the foundation of a company people thought was seconds from collapse. That's not just anything." She lowered her gaze, fingers tightening around the edge of her clutch. Years of Preston's criticisms echoed in her mind, soft, poisonous, unforgettable. "Why can't you speak clearly? You're too emotional. People like you don't get far." Dominic stepped closer, sensing the shift in her breathing. "What happened tonight? What Preston did outside? None of that is your fault." The words broke something open inside her. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "He wasn't always like this. Or maybe he was, and I didn't want to see it. I kept believing he'd choose me again if I just tried harder. If I stayed quiet. If I became smaller." Dominic's expression darkened, not with anger, but with a deep, protective sorrow. "You don't have to shrink for anyone," he said. "Not for a man threatened by your brilliance." Charlotte's throat tightened painfully. For years she had swallowed her humiliation, rationalized it, hidden it even from herself. But now the truth slipped free, piece by piece. "I stayed because I was afraid of being alone again," she admitted. "When you've grown up unwanted, you cling to anything that feels like home, even when it hurts." Dominic paused, letting the confession settle. Then he spoke with a quiet certainty. You were never unwanted, Charlotte. You were unseen. And that's a failure of the people around you, not of who you are. A tear slid down her cheek, unnoticed until Dominic gently handed her a handkerchief. So for the first time in her life, she didn't apologize for crying. Behind them, Preston watched from across the hall, confused, furious, and suddenly aware he was losing not only a wife, but the narrative he'd built around her. Because Charlotte Avery was finally telling her truth, and the world was listening. Alexis Rowan had always believed she could control any situation, especially one involving a man as predictable as Preston Kane. But as she watched Charlotte Avery glow under the gala lights, something unexpected pricked beneath her ribs. Guilt, a feeling she rarely allowed herself to experience. She slipped away from Preston's side, stepping into a quieter alcove where her clutch vibrated with a new notification. When she opened her phone, her breath caught. A message from the anonymous client who had hired her months ago. We have enough. Release everything tonight. Everything. The recordings, the screenshots, the receipts proving Preston manipulated data, berated his wife, and weaponized his position. Alexis swallowed hard. This wasn't just leverage anymore. This was the bullet that would end Preston Kane's career. She hesitated for the first time since taking the assignment. Her eyes drifted back to Charlotte, who stood talking softly with Dominic. Charlotte's expression carried a mixture of sorrow and newfound strength. It was the first time Alexis saw her not as a target's wife, but as a human being. One who had been beaten down for far too long. Maybe that's why Alexis's next move wasn't for money, or survival, or revenge. It was for justice. She dialed a number on her phone. Preston answered immediately, panic already threading his voice. Alexis? Where did you go? I need you to— You need a lot of things, Preston, she interrupted, her tone disturbingly calm. But what you deserve is finally catching up to you. What are you talking about? Alexis stepped close enough to watch his face across the room. I recorded everything. Every insult. Every lie. Every illegal thing you bragged about after 2 drinks. And tonight, her voice sharpened. Tonight the world gets to see the real Preston Kane. He blanched. You wouldn't— Oh, I would, she said with a scoff. Not because I care about the job, but because I've watched you crush the woman who never once lifted a hand against you. And then she ended the call. Within seconds, a video alert buzzed across multiple phones in the gala. First a whisper, and then a wave of gasps. Screens lit up, faces paled. The footage of Preston humiliating Charlotte, every cruel word filled the room. Charlotte turned sharply, eyes widening. Preston Kane wasn't unraveling anymore. He was combusting. The gala had erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, startled glances ricocheting across the marble hall. Preston Kane stood frozen as the video of his cruelty replayed on glowing screens, his reputation disintegrating in real time. But while the crowd focused on his downfall, Charlotte Avery felt something entirely different rising inside her. A strange, fragile freedom. Dominic Hale gently touched her elbow, guiding her away from the sudden swarm of onlookers. You don't need to watch that, he murmured. I'm okay, she whispered, though the truth trembled at the edge of her voice. He studied her carefully. No, you're not. But you will be. And not because of him. Because of you. They stepped into a quieter gallery lined with oil paintings and soft museum lighting. The noise outside faded to a distant hum. Here, Charlotte could breathe again. Dominic turned to her fully. Charlotte, there's something I've been waiting to discuss with you. Tonight only confirmed it. She blinked. Discuss what? He took a slow breath, the kind a man takes before altering the course of another person's life. I want you to come work for Hale Capital, Not as a consultant, as our chief communications strategist. Charlotte's heart stuttered. Chief? She laughed softly, almost disbelieving. Dominic, I don't think I'm... You are, he interrupted gently. You've been doing the work of an executive without the title, the pay, or the recognition. I don't reward loyalty, I reward talent. And you, Charlotte Avery, have more of it than people twice your rank. Her throat tightened. I don't know if I'm ready. Dominic's gaze softened further. You've spent years surviving a man who tried to break you. Trust me, you're ready for anything. Emotion swelled behind her ribs. No one had ever believed in her like this. No one had ever offered her something she truly earned. But he wasn't finished. There's more, Dominic said quietly. My father left behind an investment trust, one he intended for a specific heir, a woman unnamed in legal files, but whose identity I confirmed last month. Charlotte froze. Breath caught midair. Dominic stepped closer, voice a whisper meant only for her. Charlotte, the heir is you. Her world tilted, bright, disorienting, impossible. Across the hall, Preston Kane's life was collapsing. But Charlotte's? It was just beginning. Preston Kane had weathered scandals before, rumors, board conflicts, angry shareholders. But nothing prepared him for this. Nothing prepared him for the moment his own voice, laced with venom and arrogance, echoed across one of Manhattan's most prestigious galas. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. Every cruel insult he'd thrown at Charlotte, every dismissal, every degrading comment, was now public record. He lunged toward Alexis, face flushed with panic. You did this. Why would you? But Alexis stepped back, calm as marble. You did it to yourself, Preston. I just stopped covering for you. Her voice didn't tremble. His did. You don't understand, he hissed, grabbing her wrist. I'm under investigation already. If this spreads, it already has. She yanked her arm free. Maybe next time, don't underestimate the wife you tried so hard to crush. Preston staggered, his breath sharp and uneven. Around him, people whispered behind their hands. Isn't that the COO under SEC review? So he abused his wife and manipulated data? He's finished. He tried to regain control, smoothing his jacket, forcing a smile. Everyone, please. These videos are taken out of context. But the crowd wasn't listening. 2 board members approached, their faces grim. Preston, one said tightly. We've notified legal. As of tonight, you are suspended pending full investigation. You can't do that, he barked. We just did. His vision blurred. The room tilted. Prestige slipped through his fingers like sand. As if timed by fate, a news alert sounded across the room. SEC confirms probe into Kane Digital. Illegal data use suspected. Preston gasped. That was confidential. How could it be leaking already? Then he saw her. Charlotte, gentle, trembling Charlotte, standing beside Dominic Hale, the man whose influence stretched across Wall Street like a shadow. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Dominic didn't just admire Charlotte. He was protecting her, and Preston had given Dominic every tool needed to ruin him. He stumbled toward her, desperate now, broken veneer cracking with each breath. Charlotte, please! You have to tell them it's not what it looks like. Charlotte met his panic with a calm he'd never seen in her. Her voice, steady for the first time that night, cut through him. You humiliated me for years, Preston. Tonight, or you finally humiliated yourself. He opened his mouth. No words came out. Because deep down, he knew she was right. Dominic stepped forward, placing himself between them. Walk away, Preston. And for the first time in his life, Preston Kane obeyed. The moment Preston Kane obeyed Dominic Hale's command, the entire energy of the gala shifted. Guests pretended not to stare, but every eye followed him, some with disgust, others with fascination, all sensing they were witnessing the downfall of a man who once believed he was untouchable. Charlotte stood still, breath unsteady, as Preston lingered a few feet away. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence. His once flawless tuxedo seemed wrinkled, his confidence shattered, his voice uncharacteristically thin. "Charlotte, please," he whispered, desperation clinging to every syllable. Can we talk? Just us?" For years, she would have crumbled at that tone. She would have followed him, tried to fix what wasn't hers to fix, tried to carry a marriage built on her silence. But tonight, something inside her had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably. "No," she said softly, but firmly. "We're not doing that anymore." Preston's face twisted. "You don't understand. Everything's falling apart. The board, SEC, my reputation." Charlotte lifted a hand, stopping him. "Your downfall has nothing to do with me. You created it long before tonight." His breath hitched. "I loved you, Charlotte." She met his eyes, really looked at him, for the first time in years. And she saw it clearly now. Not love, but possession. Not partnership, but control. "You loved the version of me that didn't speak," she replied. "The one who never challenged you." "Well, but that wasn't love, Preston. That was convenience." The surrounding guests went silent, sensing something monumental unfolding. Preston's voice cracked. "You're choosing him, aren't you?" Charlotte didn't turn to look at Dominic. She didn't need to. "This isn't about choosing a man," she said. "It's about choosing myself." Dominic stepped forward then, not claiming her, not overshadowing her, simply standing beside her in silent solidarity. His presence was protective, not possessive. Preston looked between them, realization dawning like a brutal sunrise. "You're really leaving me?" Charlotte nodded once. "I left you the moment you chose to humiliate me. Tonight just made it public." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Something inside Preston broke. His shoulders slumped. The arrogance drained away, so leaving only the hollow remains of a man who never believed he could be replaced. Dominic's voice was steady. "It's time for you to go, Preston." For the second time that night, Preston Kane backed away, defeated, exposed, and utterly alone. Charlotte Avery had survived humiliation before, quietly, privately, invisibly. But tonight, as the gala lights shimmered across the marble floor and the echo of Preston's retreat faded, something inside her gave way. Not in weakness, but in release. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from the sudden understanding that she had spent years clinging to a man who had never once chosen her with the tenderness she deserved. The realization stung, sharp and clean. Dominic noticed the shift immediately. "Charlotte," he said softly, stepping closer. "Breathe." His voice, steady, warm, uncertain, cut through the noise in her chest. She hadn't expected comfort tonight. She hadn't expected anything. But when she lifted her eyes, the room around them blurred, leaving only Dominic's gaze anchoring her to the present. "I'm okay," she whispered, though her breath wavered. "No," he said gently. "You're hurting, and you're allowed to." The words undid her. Years of silence, years of swallowing tears, shrinking herself, hiding bruises that weren't physical but still marked her, rose inside her like a wave she could no longer hold back. Her voice cracked. "I didn't want anyone to see me fall apart. Not here." Dominic's expression softened into something almost reverent. "Falling apart doesn't make you weak. Staying in that marriage did." A single tear escaped down her cheek. She startled at the feeling. as if crying in public were a violation of some contract she'd signed long ago. But Dominic reached out, not to wipe it away, but to offer a soft linen handkerchief. Charlotte hesitated before accepting it, her fingers brushing his. The touch was gentle, grounding, unexpectedly intimate. Across the hall, guests watched quietly, not with judgment, but with empathy. Because for the first time tonight, they didn't see a humiliated woman. They saw a survivor reclaiming herself. Charlotte exhaled, shaky but new. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "I don't know who I am without him." Dominic's voice dipped to a tender certainty. "You're about to find out. And trust me, you're more than he ever allowed you to be." Something warm unfurled in her chest, small, fragile, but unmistakably hope. Behind them, Preston's exit had sealed his fate. But Charlotte, she was stepping into a life she had never believed she deserved. Preston Kane did not leave the gala so much as flee it. Security followed at a distance, not because he needed protection, but because they weren't sure what a man unraveling this violently might attempt. His once perfect posture had collapsed into a frantic, staggering march toward the exit. Just outside the museum's grand staircase, Manhattan's winter wind hit him like a wall. It stole his breath, whipped through his hair, and made his eyes sting. Not with tears, he told himself, but from the cold. Yet he knew the truth. He wasn't crying for Charlotte. He was crying for himself. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Emails, missed calls, headlines blooming faster than he could open them. Kane Digital, COO, exposed in verbal abuse scandal. SEC confirms new evidence in data manipulation probe. Wife of Preston Kane, revealed as key strategist behind Hale Capital turnaround. That last one hit hardest. Charlotte, quiet, trembling Charlotte, had overshadowed him in a single night. The crowd that once applauded him now questioned him. The board that once feared him now drafted emergency exit strategies. The investors who once chased him now demanded answers. He had mocked her for being invisible. But now, he was the one fading. A black sedan pulled up, company car, driver tense behind the wheel. Preston collapsed into the back seat, gripping his temples. "Tell me the board hasn't made any final decisions," he muttered. The driver cleared his throat. "Sir, they've requested your resignation by morning." Preston's stomach dropped. No, they wouldn't. They said the videos damaged the brand beyond repair." He buried his face in his hands. Everything he built, everything he bragged about, everything he believed he deserved, collapsing like a structure made of glass. Then came the notification that sealed his fate entirely. A forwarded message from a journalist. "We have a source confirming your mistress is cooperating with investigators." Alexis had flipped. Shock rippled through him, followed by a surge of disbelief so strong it nearly choked him. After everything he gave her, attention, money, promises, she had chosen survival over loyalty. He should have predicted that. He should have known a woman trained to manipulate could just as easily betray. But he hadn't predicted one thing: that Charlotte would rise while he burned. Preston looked back toward the museum's glowing entrance. Somewhere inside, she stood next to a man powerful enough to eclipse him completely. And for the first time, Preston understood the cruelty of karma. He hadn't just lost his marriage, he had lost to the woman he thought could never win. While Preston Kane spiraled outside the museum, Charlotte Avery stood inside the grand hall of the Met, surrounded by warm lights and the soft murmur of admiration. For the first time in her life, the attention didn't suffocate her. It didn't demand perfection. It didn't shrink her. It lifted her. Dominic Hale remained nearby, not possessive, not overbearing, simply present in a way that felt steadying. His presence wasn't a shadow, but a shelter. "Charlotte," he said quietly, offering her a glass of sparkling water to ease her trembling hands. "I hope you understand tonight wasn't just about exposing Preston. It was about revealing you." She exhaled shakily. "It feels surreal. I've spent years being told I was small." Dominic's eyes softened. "You were never small. You were simply standing next to someone who needed you to be." Those words landed deep, like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for years. A group of executives approached, some from Hale Capital, others from partner firms. "Ms. Avery," one said warmly, "we'd be honored to hear your vision for next quarter's expansion." Another added, "Your report on crisis forecasting was genius. How did we not know it was you?" Charlotte's instinct was to shrink, to deflect, to claim luck. But tonight, she tried something different. She lifted her chin. "Thank you. I worked very hard on it." The simple sentence felt like claiming her own name for the first time. The group exchanged impressed looks. A woman leaned in and whispered, "You're the kind of leader this town needs." Leader. The word made her heart thud. As the executives drifted away, Dominic stepped closer. "That, right there, is who you truly are." Charlotte felt warmth spread through her chest, a slow blooming she hadn't felt in years. "I'm not used to being seen." "You will be," Dominic replied softly, "because you're stepping into a world you were always meant to belong to." She looked toward the tall windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. The city glittered, alive, endless, waiting. "So much has changed in one night," she whispered. Dominic hesitated, then said something that made her breath catch. "Not changed, Charlotte. Not revealed." And when she smiled, soft, genuine, unguarded, Dominic looked at her as if she were the most extraordinary thing he had ever witnessed. Behind them, distant murmurs confirmed Preston's collapse. But here, in this hall of marble and light, Charlotte Avery was rising, and nothing could push her back into the shadows again. The gala slowly drew toward its close, but Charlotte Avery remained at the center of a world she never imagined she would inhabit. Not as a shadow, not as someone tolerated, but as a woman finally standing in her own light. The orchestra played softly. Guests floated across the marble floors, and the earlier chaos had transformed into admiration. Dominic Hale waited until the final speech ended before approaching her again, his gaze warm, steady. "Charlotte," he said softly, "I know tonight was overwhelming, but I hope it also showed you something important." She tilted her head. "What's that?" "That you were never meant to live a life built on someone else's insecurity." The words landed deep. Charlotte didn't cry this time. She felt something steadier, acceptance, clarity, a quiet strength that radiated from the inside out. She looked out across the hall. People smiled at her, not out of pity or politeness, but out of respect. She saw doors opening, possibilities widening, a path clearing that she didn't have to beg for anymore. "Dominic, thank you," she said. "Not just for tonight, for believing in me before I believed in myself." He hesitated, unusual for a man who commanded Wall Street. "There's something else," he said gently. "I know you've been hurt. I know trust won't come easily. But if you ever choose to start something new, I'd like the chance to be part of that." Charlotte's breath caught. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't pressure. It was an invitation. Soft, earnest, and entirely hers to accept or decline. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not ready today. But one day, maybe." Dominic smiled, not disappointed but relieved. One day is more than enough. As they walked toward the exit together, cameras flashed, not to expose scandal, but to capture a new beginning. Outside, The same midnight blue Rolls-Royce waited, its polished chrome reflecting the Manhattan skyline like a promise. Before stepping inside, Charlotte paused. She slipped her wedding ring off, slow, deliberate, and placed it gently into the driver's hand. "No more shadows," she said softly. The driver nodded, understanding. Inside the Rolls-Royce, Dominic offered his hand, not as a savior, but as a companion. Charlotte took it with calm certainty. Behind her, Preston Kane faced the rubble of the life he destroyed. Ahead of her, the city glowed, endless, welcoming, hers at last. Charlotte Avery wasn't reborn tonight. She was finally recognized. So that's how our story comes to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, my friend, then something in Charlotte's journey must have touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of a time you felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. Maybe it echoed a truth you've been carrying silently. The Stoics often said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Charlotte's pain wasn't her ending. It was the doorway she needed to step into a life worthy of her strength. And that's a reminder for all of us. The people who try to dim your light never get to decide how bright you shine. You do. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. You deserve the chance to rebuild, even if it means letting go of the things you once clung to. If this story made you feel something, hope, courage, maybe even a little healing, then don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who might need this message today. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss another journey like this. We're here for you. And your story matters too. This story is a work of fictional drama, created solely for entertainment and emotional reflection. The characters, events, and situations are imagined and not based on real individuals or real-life incidents. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. The purpose of this narrative is to explore themes of resilience, personal growth, and emotional healing through storytelling. Viewers are encouraged to enjoy the message, take inspiration where it resonates, and remember that the scenes described are crafted for dramatic effect. Our goal is to create meaningful content that uplifts, encourages empathy, and offers valuable life lessons. If you appreciate stories like this, please like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you thoughtful and heartfelt narratives.